The room erupted in polite applause, the kind that doesn't quite reach anyone's eyes. I smiled, clapped along with everyone else, and stared at the balloon arch behind the cake that read, "Congrats on 10 years," in oversized silver letters. 10 years. A full decade of showing up early, staying late, mentoring every new hire, fixing every spreadsheet that mysteriously broke, and saving every presentation that almost got tanked before a client pitch. And now, on the day that was supposed to mean something, I watched my intern, Kyle, step forward to accept my raise, my promotion, and my future. "Let's give it up for Kyle," my boss beamed. "He's only been here a year, but innovation speaks for itself. This is what fresh thinking looks like." I tilted my head and applauded louder, my hands stinging slightly. I had to admire the showmanship. The cruelty of it was almost artistic. "My name is Nora. I'm 36, and I'm the Senior Operations Analyst at Vantage Systems, Inc. Well, was. This is the story of how they thought they could quietly erase me, and how, calmly, quietly, I gave them a Monday they'll never forget. When I joined Vantage 10 years ago, it was nothing more than a struggling logistics firm with 10 employees and no direction. I was 26, broke, and grateful to be anywhere with heating. I learned every tool, every system, and built entire operational pipelines from scratch. People stopped calling me Nora. I became the fixer, the one they pulled in when something was broken, too risky, or needed to be rewritten overnight. When Kyle joined last summer, fresh from a startup job that lasted 3 months, he was energetic, charming, and completely lost. I spent weeks training him. I even rewrote his onboarding materials because HR hadn't updated them since 2017. He made errors. Many. He once overwrote a live invoice database, and I spent 6 hours recovering it. He sent the wrong report to the COO. I cleaned it up before she even opened it. But Kyle? He was good at looking confident. And confidence, I've learned, is a performance art. I remember exactly how it happened. There were cupcakes in the break room, and someone brought in a gold-framed certificate for me. My name in block letters with the phrase "loyal dedication" printed underneath. My boss, Darren, gave a speech filled with the usual cliches. "And let's not forget our Nora," he said, barely glancing at me. 10 years. That's rare these days. Consistency is valuable. But innovation? He turned toward Kyle, who was already stepping forward with a smile. "Innovation is the future, and we've decided that Kyle will be taking on the role of Associate Director of Operations moving forward. He's shown initiative, and his vision aligns with where we're headed. Congrats, Kyle." A few awkward glances bounced around the room. Even Beth from HR stopped chewing for a moment. I didn't say a word. I smiled, clapped again, and nodded graciously. "You're taking this well," Darren whispered later at my desk, chuckling as if we were old friends. "You know, you've got to keep up. Gen Z moves fast. We need fresh ideas, not just experience." Fresh ideas. Right. What Darren didn't know, and what no one in that room had realized, was that 2 months ago, I'd quietly launched NVM Consulting, a digital logistics firm tailored to mid-market clients, powered by a proprietary AI-based system I'd been coding for the past 3 years. On my own time. With my own money. And with the legal blessing of a very expensive intellectual property attorney. As of this week, NVM had 5 clients, including 2 of Vantage's top-tier partners who had approached me discreetly after I presented a hypothetical model at a networking event in April. They loved the model. They signed immediately, and their contracts went into effect this Monday. "You okay?" Kyle asked as we crossed paths at the coffee machine, still basking in his hollow promotion glow. "Perfect," I replied. "Looking forward to Monday." He laughed like it was a joke. I smiled with him. But I wasn't joking. Because on Monday morning, when Darren opens his inbox, he'll find 2 resignation letters from 2 major clients. Letters I drafted myself. And when he calls their offices in a panic, he won't know that the name he'll hear on the other end of the line isn't a stranger. It'll be mine. Nora Valentine Meyer, CEO of their new vendor. Most people assume revenge is loud, that it slams doors and flips tables. But mine was quiet, methodical, strategic. Like the way you slowly tighten a valve until the pressure builds so high it breaks the whole machine, and no one hears the crack until it's too late. That's exactly what I'd been doing for the past 3 years. It started the day I realized Darren wasn't ever going to promote me. I'd led a 6-month project that saved the company $2.4 million. My reward? A gift card to a restaurant that had gone out of business 6 weeks earlier. No bonus, no title change. Just a casual pat on the back in a team meeting Darren barely stayed awake through. That night, I stayed in the office long after the lights dimmed. I opened a blank notebook and wrote 3 words. Build your exit. Not quit, not leave. I wanted something more than escape. I wanted leverage, legacy, independence. I didn't quit my job. I did something worse. I stayed. But I stopped building their systems and quietly started building mine. At night, in my apartment, I coded the core of what would become the NVM system, a logistics optimization tool powered by predictive AI. I consulted freelance data scientists, negotiated back-end licenses, tested user interface flows on weekends. I opened a bank account, then a business account. Then I formed an LLC under a quiet shell name, Fifth Arc Holdings. Nobody noticed. Darren thought I was boring. Kyle thought I was outdated. My coworkers thought I was loyal. They all underestimated me, which, funnily enough, became my greatest advantage. I remember the first client I landed. It wasn't even on purpose. I was at a conference, half listening to a panel while sipping burnt hotel coffee, when a woman sat beside me and started venting about her company's supply chain issues. I offered a few ideas. She was intrigued. I mentioned I'd been developing a model. 3 weeks later, she signed a pilot contract. The moment she did, I knew I wasn't just dreaming anymore. I was in business. And yet, back at Vantage, things carried on like nothing had changed. Every Friday, I updated Kyle's reports because he couldn't remember which spreadsheet was live. Every Monday, I listened to Darren make jokes about millennials, Gen Z, and real leadership, while I quietly closed deals through the consulting firm he didn't know existed. It was poetic, really. But it wasn't just about the business. It was about all the things they didn't see. The nights I stayed until 2 a.m. to prep Darren's board pitches because he forgot he had a presentation. The times I covered for Kyle's errors so he wouldn't get fired. The meetings I wasn't invited to, even though the numbers they presented were mine. They saw me as a fixture, a dependable background prop, not a player. And the truth is, it hurt. Even when you know your worth, it still hurts when people don't even bother to look. When your name doesn't get mentioned, when your seat is always just outside the main table. But instead of fighting for their table, I started building my own. 2 weeks before my anniversary surprise, I met with our top client, Delphar Logistics, for a casual dinner. They were frustrated with Vantage. Too slow, too rigid, too old school. I showed them what I was working on. Just a taste. They asked if I could implement it for them. I said yes. They signed the contract the following Tuesday. A day later, Northgate Freight, another Vantage partner, reached out after hearing about a new AI system making waves. They wanted in too. By the time I walked into that break room filled with streamers and lukewarm cupcakes, my company had already secured $2.3 million in committed contracts. And no one in that room knew. Not Darren. Not Kyle. Not even HR. You've always been consistent, Darren had said. Like I was a piece of dependable office furniture. But consistency without recognition is a slow kind of erasure. And I was done disappearing. I didn't cry when they gave Kyle the promotion. I didn't scream. I didn't even flinch. Because while they were celebrating a title, I was holding something far more powerful. Ownership, control, and a very specific plan for Monday. One that involved 2 resignation letters, a system shutdown, and a boardroom meeting that no one would forget. I smiled as I walked past Kyle's desk that afternoon. He had his feet up scrolling TikTok. "Have a great weekend," he said, grinning. "You too," I replied. And I meant it, because mine was about to be unforgettable. The sun rose like any other Monday, but the air felt different. Charged. I took my time getting dressed. No more bland corporate slacks or muted tones. This morning, I wore a sharp navy blazer over a black silk blouse and matching tailored pants. Understated, but quietly expensive. Professional, but with edge. Today was the day I'd waited 3 years for. The day they would see me. Not as loyal Nora or background Nora or she's just always here, Nora, but as what I'd always been. Essential. I walked into Vantage's building at 8:05 a.m., just a few minutes late on purpose, enough to raise an eyebrow without suspicion. I wanted to see it all unfold live. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. A couple of junior staff nodded at me awkwardly. Someone from finance complimented my jacket. "You look different today," he said. "I feel different," I replied. I stepped onto the operations floor and immediately sensed the shift. Darren's office door was open. His voice, usually smug and lazy, was sharp, panicked. "No, this doesn't make sense. Why would they cancel out of nowhere? Did you double-check the email headers? This has to be a mistake." I walked calmly to my desk, set down my bag, and opened my laptop. One of the interns, Mia, leaned over from across the desk. "Hey, did you hear? Delphar Logistics just pulled out. Something about a new vendor?" I nodded slowly. That's unexpected. I watched Darren through the glass walls of his office. He was pacing now, sweating, his tie already loosened. Another call came in. This time it was Northgate. His face drained of color. By 8:32 a.m., the entire executive floor was buzzing. I heard whispers from the marketing team. Someone from legal ran down the hallway. It was trying to access a platform they no longer had credentials for. By 8:45 a.m., a meeting request went out. All staff urgent, 9 a.m., conference room A. It was happening. Kyle breezed in at 8:50 a.m., Starbucks cup in hand, sunglasses still on. "What's going on?" he asked, sliding into his new office, my old corner cubicle. No one answered. The mood had changed, and even he felt it. Darren emerged just before 9 o'clock, red-faced, trying to appear in control. "We need all department leads in the main conference room now," he barked. Kyle blinked. I guess that's me now," he said, glancing at me for validation. I gave him a polite smile. "Yes, that's you." Then I stood up and followed him. The room was filled with confused department heads, middle managers, and assistants, everyone murmuring. I sat near the back quietly. Darren stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. "We've had a couple of unexpected developments this morning. Delphar and Northgate have both terminated their contracts with immediate effect. No notice, just dropped us." Gasps and whispers rippled across the room. "These were 2 of our top 5 clients," Darren continued, "and they've both cited strategic realignment and vendor consolidation as the reasons. I don't know what that means yet, but we're investigating." He didn't know because I hadn't told him. What it meant was that both clients were now fully contracted with my firm, NVM Consulting, and by noon my systems would be live. "But that's not all," Darren added. "We've also discovered that our operations platform, our internal process tracker, has been disabled. Apparently the licensing agreement expired Friday. We're working to renew it immediately." Except they couldn't, because that license wasn't Vantage's. It was mine. Registered through my Shell LLC, licensed to Vantage as a third-party integration under a limited 3-year term. A term that had expired Friday at 11:59 p.m. "What does this mean?" Kyle finally spoke, confused. "Can't we just, turn it back on?" Darren's jaw clenched. "No, Kyle. We can't just turn it back on." I watched their panic build like water behind a dam. I waited for the question I knew would come. And at 9:11 a.m., it did. "Does anyone know more about this system?" Darren asked, scanning the room. "Who developed it originally?" Slowly, every head turned toward me. I smiled. Just a little. Just enough. I built the original framework, I said evenly, 3 years ago, as part of my role here. But, Darren stammered, but that's proprietary. It's Vantage property. Not quite, I replied calmly. If you check the agreement signed in 2021, you'll see the software was licensed, not owned, under a different company name. All legal. You might want your legal team to review it again. Silence. Pure, uncomfortable silence. What company? Someone asked. I looked up. NVM Consulting. More silence. Then, what does NVM stand for? I stood up, straightened my jacket. Nora Valentine Meyer. Kyle's mouth fell open. Darren just sat down. Slowly, like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. And then I delivered the final blow. There's one more thing, I added, pausing. I'll be submitting my resignation today, effective immediately, though I suppose in many ways I already left a long time ago. I turned to walk out, but paused at the door. Oh, and just so you're aware, Northgate and Delphar asked me to schedule a meeting with their new vendor this afternoon. That vendor is me. And with that, I left. By noon that day, my name was everywhere inside Vantage, whispered in disbelief, repeated in fragments like an urban legend. Some called it betrayal. Others called it genius. But I didn't care what they called it. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't invisible. I took the rest of the afternoon off. Not because I was tired. I wasn't. I was alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. But because I knew the phone calls were coming. Sure enough, by 2 p.m., I had 5 missed calls from Darren, 2 from HR, and a desperate voicemail from Kyle that began with, "Hey, so I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." There hadn't been, and by 2:30 p.m., both Delphar and Northgate had confirmed the launch of our systems, on schedule, without a hitch. They were thrilled, efficient, seamless, better than anything they'd had with Vantage. By 3 p.m., I was sitting in my favorite cafe across from Samir, my business attorney, reviewing final paperwork for a new office lease. A real office this time. No more co-working spaces or late-night coding from my kitchen table. "Nora," he said, flipping through the contracts. "You understand what just happened, right?" I raised an eyebrow. "You didn't just leave a job. You flipped the board. You didn't just walk out. You took the engine with you and left them with the shell." I sipped my coffee. "Is that your legal opinion?" He grinned. "Number, that's my personal admiration." But once the adrenaline started to fade, the silence came. The quiet of stepping away from something that had consumed a decade of my life. The strange stillness of no longer needing to prove myself to people who never saw me in the first place. It hit me that evening as I sat alone on my balcony overlooking the city. The skyline had always felt so distant. But now it looked different. Not unreachable, but earned. 10 years is a long time to give to people who never said thank you. And yet, there was grief in the letting go. Grief for the version of me that had once believed being loyal would be enough. A text came in from Lisa, one of the junior analysts I'd mentored. "Is it true? Did you really build your own company? Can I talk to you?" I stared at the message for a while, then typed, "Yes. Let's talk tomorrow." Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about rebuilding something better, not just for me, but for the people still stuck under the glass ceiling I'd just shattered. By the end of the week, 3 other employees from Vantage reached out. One from IT, one from marketing, and Beth from HR. Each message had the same tone. "I want out. I want in." I didn't promise them anything yet. I wasn't building an empire overnight, but I was building it. Carefully, intentionally. On Friday, a package arrived at my apartment. No note, no return address. Inside, the framed certificate I'd received at the celebration. Loyal dedication, Nora Meyer, 10 years of service. There was a faint coffee stain on the corner, like someone had set a cup on it before mailing it off. I laughed. Not out of humor, but the kind of laugh you give when something is so small, so petty, that it proves everything you ever suspected. I set the frame face down in a drawer and closed it. That weekend, I met my parents for dinner. They didn't know everything, just that I'd left the company. My dad, ever the traditionalist, raised an eyebrow. No pension? No severance? No need, I said. I've already replaced the income. He nodded slowly, not understanding. My mother smiled politely and changed the subject to my cousin's wedding. They wouldn't get it. Not yet. But that was okay. This win wasn't for them. It was for the version of myself who had once sat in meetings and swallowed disappointment like it was breakfast. For the nights I spent working overtime while Kyle got drinks with Darren. For every time I had to explain my worth to people who refused to see it. On Monday morning, Vantage released a carefully worded company-wide email. Due to unforeseen transitions, we are restructuring our operations division and reevaluating client partnerships. What they didn't mention was that the restructure involved losing 2 major contracts, an internal system collapse, and the person who used to keep everything running without applause. But I didn't need them to say it, because everyone knew. And now, everyone was watching. By the second week, Vantage Systems was unraveling quietly. No news articles, no dramatic collapse. Just silence. Missed deadlines. Canceled meetings. Confused clients. And behind it all, the growing realization that I had been the thread holding the entire thing together. They didn't know it yet, but they'd built the company on my back. I just finally stood up. I got an email from Beth in HR. Confidentially, legal's trying to figure out how they didn't catch the software licensing loophole. They're panicking. Apparently the system you developed? None of them knew it wasn't built in-house. She added a single sentence. I'd like to talk about working with you, if that's on the table. I stared at it for a while. I remembered Beth sitting through endless performance reviews, watching people like me get meets expectations, while others, mostly louder and male, got exceeds expectations for doing half the work. Maybe she saw what was happening all along. Maybe she didn't. But now, even she wanted out. It was strange being the one people wanted to follow. For so long, I had moved through Vantage like a shadow. Dependable, unremarkable, quietly competent. Now, people who never made eye contact were messaging me. Let's grab coffee. Would love to get your thoughts. You're an inspiration. But I didn't want admiration. I wanted something else. Respect. Not the kind you ask for. The kind you earn when you walk away from the fire you built, and it collapses without you. Kyle sent me a message too. Hi, Nora. No idea how you pulled this off, but congrats, I guess. Darren's losing it. He wants to talk. Says we can figure something out. He's offering some kind of consultant role. 6 figures, flexible hours. Sounded desperate. I didn't reply. I'd had 6-figure offers before. What I never had was autonomy, ownership, voice. Darren's offer came too late. Besides, I wasn't available. I had meetings lined up with 2 new clients, one in biotech, one in international shipping. Both had found me through referrals. Both had signed NDAs, and both wanted exactly what I built. A solution designed by someone who knew how broken traditional systems really were. At my new office, still half-furnished but filled with energy, I met with Lisa, the junior analyst from Vantage. She looked nervous, a little out of place, like she hadn't quite decided whether this was bravery or betrayal. I handed her a coffee. You okay? She nodded. Honestly, I'm tired. I kept thinking that if I just worked harder, maybe they'd notice. But when you left, I realized they only notice when you disappear. I smiled. Same reason I started building. She looked down. I want to learn from you. I don't want to be invisible anymore. I didn't hesitate. You're in. Because this wasn't just about leaving something broken behind. It was about building something better. With the right people. By week 3, rumors started flying. An anonymous blog post appeared online titled, "When the woman who built your company leaves, what happens next?" The writer never named names, but it didn't matter. Everyone at Vantage recognized the story. Everyone in the industry heard the whispers. I didn't write it, but I didn't need to. The narrative was spreading itself, a quiet, powerful rebrand of who I was and what I'd done. Darren finally called me. Twice. Then he emailed, "I regret how things unfolded. Your departure has made us all reflect on our internal dynamics. I'd be open to a conversation about re-engagement on your terms." It was professional, vague, drenched in fear. I drafted a one-line response. "I appreciate the offer, but I no longer work for people who don't recognize value until it's gone." Then I deleted it. I didn't need to respond at all. Sometimes silence is the only punctuation you need. That Friday, I stood alone in my new office, watching the city lights flicker like static. I thought about how far I'd come. From late-night email drafts for other people's wins to signing contracts under my own name. I thought about the people who doubted me, the ones who dismissed me, and the ones who were now pretending they always believed in me. And then I thought about what came next. Because the empire I was building, it was only just beginning. 3 months later, the old version of my life feels like someone else's story. Vantage is still limping along. Their quarterly numbers are down 42%. Word is, the board isn't happy. Darren's been transitioned into an advisory role, which in corporate terms means they've locked him in a quiet office and are waiting for him to retire or disappear. Kyle didn't last. The promotion that was handed to him started unraveling the moment the support system he didn't know he had, me, vanished. Reports fell through. Client communication failed. Staff started pushing back. He handed in his resignation a few weeks ago. Rumor is he's back at his parents' house, planning to launch a podcast on leadership. The irony writes itself. Meanwhile, NVM Consulting now has 6 full-time employees, 3 interns, and a waitlist of clients. We moved into a full floor of office space last month. Nothing flashy, but efficient, sunlit, open. And every desk is occupied by someone who was once overlooked, underestimated, or talked over. We've built systems smarter than anything I ever saw at Vantage. We've automated logistics chains that used to take teams weeks to analyze. We've saved our clients millions. But the part I'm proudest of? We did it without stepping on each other. No one has to beg to be seen here. No one has to explain their worth twice. Every now and then, I still get the odd message. From former coworkers who suddenly want to grab coffee. From LinkedIn connections who once ignored me, now praising what an inspiring journey I've had. I don't respond to most of them, not out of malice, but because I've learned that not every hand deserves to be reached back for. Some people only recognize your value after they can't use it anymore. My parents eventually found out what happened. Not from me. From my aunt, who read about NVM in a business journal and sent my mother the article with a sticky note that said, "Your daughter's doing well. Thought you'd want to know, we haven't really talked about it. They ask vague questions. I give polite answers. It's easier that way. I'm not interested in proving anything anymore. I've moved beyond needing their approval. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't confrontation. It's elevation. Rising so far above their expectations, their judgment becomes irrelevant. I still walk by Vantage's building now and then. It's on my commute to the gym. Last week, I passed it again. Same lobby, same worn carpet, same heavy glass doors that used to feel like a barrier. This time, I didn't even glance inside. Not because I was avoiding it, but because I'd finally realized it didn't matter. I don't need to revisit what I outgrew. I don't need to reclaim a space I no longer want. I built my own. One night, I sat with Lisa in our office long after everyone else had gone. She was reviewing a proposal from a new potential client. I was finishing budget revisions. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then she said, "You know what's weird? I don't wake up dreading Mondays anymore." I looked up, smiled. Neither do I. Because this time I wasn't waking up to prove myself. I was waking up to build, to create something from scratch with people I trusted, to own my wins, my hours, my future. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Darren had promoted me, if he'd recognized my work, if he'd said the words I waited years to hear. You deserve this. Would I still be there? Still chasing titles? Still explaining my worth in every meeting? Probably. And that's the truth they'll never understand. The moment they denied me wasn't the failure, it was the gift, the permission to stop waiting. I didn't get a trophy. I didn't throw a party. There was no speech, no champagne, no big "I told you so." Just quiet. Just peace. Just the sound of my own footsteps in a place I built with my own hands. A place where I didn't need to be louder, or younger, or more charming. Just smarter, and finally free. Because in the end, I didn't need a seat at their table. I built my own, and made sure every damn chair had a name on it. For people like me,